them in a court of law before making their official statements. Before making their official statements, they are given the evidence that will be brought against them in a court of law. This, to me, is giving policemen way too much power in their position. And what can you else expect to have happen? Knowing this, knowing they're above the law, how can you be surprised that they overreact and shoot down an innocent man? You shouldn't be surprised. There's nothing that can scare them. There's nothing that's going to put them in a position where they're ever going to see one day in jail or even ever be presented against as being a criminal. This doesn't happen. And this is the police state we live in. The police state that we live in called the United States of America. Just unreal. Now, other events that have occurred here of note. Well, today is an interesting day of note as far as gun control. We've gone over the police not using guns in a negative way. We've gone over our hatred of immigrants that Donald Trump has trumpeted, pardon the pun, to us. It's not surprising here that these events kind of tie together. This final event ties together something that happened today. As I said, in Tennessee, we don't know yet if it's a terrorist act. We're giving the impression here early on by CNN that we may possibly have been inspired by foreign terrorists. Here is a domestic terrorist today who was convicted. James Holmes was convicted in the massacre that killed 12 people and injured 70. And now he could face the death penalty. Jurors rejected defense arguments that Holmes was insane and driven by delusions during the attack. Here's some scary things that we learned. Maybe it's been earlier presented, but I learned today that are scary. Now, first of all, a little more on the Holmes' defense. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Defense attorneys argue that Holmes, heavily armed with explosives strapped to his body, was in the clutches of a psychotic episode when he ambushed the theater during the showing of The Dark Knight Rises. This would make sense except for the fact that it was premeditated, as we now know, that his entire apartment was booby-trapped with the intent of killing even more people as they came to respond to the situation. The tragedy is considered one of the worst mass shootings in U.S. history. He was dressed in police-like riot gear, was armed with 3 guns and more than 700 rounds of ammunition. And here's the thing that is even scarier. He only stopped when the gun stopped. Yes, the reason he stopped was his gun jammed. If his gun had not jammed, even more would have obviously been killed. I don't know. I think it's unfortunate, and this is going to sound really, really heinous. Unfortunate, maybe, that his gun jammed. It seems to me we need at least 100 dead in a shooting. Maybe 1,000 dead in a shooting. Maybe we get 1,000 people killed in a shooting. Someone might say, we have to do something about this, and actually it will last more than a month and a half or so after the event. I don't know. I mean, what does it take for us to understand that there's certain people who don't need to have a gun? I know that it seems absurd, and many will question me when I say I'm anti-gun. To the extent, do you want anti-gun? I mean, the Second Amendment should serve a purpose, and it should be important, and I agree it should be important. The problem is we're stuck with guns. As American culture, we are stuck with guns because we've used them so many ways in a positive sense that it's hard to fight the negative part of it without, you can't take away the positive guns, so to speak. Protection. In these times when there are insane people who are out to kill for no reason, it's definitely unquestionably a good argument to say you feel more secure and you deserve to have a gun if it's only for your self-defense. The question is how do we provide the evidence that the gun is being purchased for either self-defense or for entertainment. And you can't. So you have these two options on the sides. The option A, just make guns illegal. You're going to have the NRA, you're going to have the Republican Party members in uproar. This isn't, even though it's an insane possible consideration that if the American government decided to become a dictatorship and take over, that we would have a prayer, even the slightest prayer, small militias with people with guns going up against the government takeover that owns the army, tanks, and all this ammunition and nuclear weapons. Besides that, insane to think that we could do anything about it. It's also insane to think that the government would have anything to gain by taking over completely as a dictatorship. It's just not going to happen. You're living in the movie 1984. You're living in you're watching too much Walking Dead. Maybe, I don't know. It's not going to happen. Okay, so why do we still need guns? Because unfortunately, much like drugs, guns are sold illegally. And Donald Trump will tell you they're coming across the border with these illegal aliens who are murdering and raping our families. So, option A is off the table. So the only true option we have in this country is a two-pronged attack to stop the killings. You can't take guns off the table. Not going to happen. They're a part of society. We have to at least sit down and admit that for the most part, in that war, we've already lost. So we have to make sure of two things. The background checks that we're doing are obviously not working. They need to be more stringent. There should be more of a time lapse between applying for a license for a gun and getting a gun and actually receiving the gun. There should be more thorough background checks, psychological analysis. Hey, it may cost a little extra money, but let's think about how many lives it would save if a gentleman like Dylan and James don't get a hold of a gun, or guns in this case with James Holmes. The second avenue we have to take here deals with the carry and conceal laws that we have going. Those also should require stringent background checks, and even people who are looking to buy guns to protect themselves need to be looked at. And in conclusion, as far as as I said, the ridiculous concern that Don has with illegal immigrants bringing drugs and weapons, and killing and murdering and raping. Immigration laws, I agree, need to be stricter. I don't agree with President Obama as far as giving illegal aliens citizenship. They need to go through the same steps as those who have gone through the proper procedures across the border. And those who are not assets, those who are not willing to show a desire to be an asset to our country, those who are most likely going to be put in a category where it's considered they're going to be on the welfare state of our country, do not deserve citizenship. Making our country exclusive is a dangerous, slippery slope, though. I would agree with that. Once you begin to define immigration as only the best get through the gates, you kind of lost the war on being a free country. I think there's a lot of people who agree with me on that. There's a lot of us who got here who's only here because our immigrants' parents arrived, and not all of them were the cream of the crop from Europe. So anyways, those are my opening statements to the show today. I have a lot on my mind, a lot going down. The Iran agreement, I'm for it. But in the same regard, kind of like with immigration and gun, safe gun laws, I am pessimistically optimistic that this is the route to go. The alternative being worse than the diplomatic solution. War being the alternative, and more lives lost by way of the gun in that regard. We lose so many lives by the gun by so many different ways. It's astounding, actually. It's astounding. Either if the gun is from a soldier's arms, a terrorist's arms, a domestic terrorist arms, international terrorist or domestic terrorist arms, a criminal's arms, or even those in self-defense who believe they're defending themselves, or our own police force. Guns continue to kill at a rapidly astounding pace with no foreseeable way of stopping it in the future. But as I've said before, I shouldn't lament too much because it's kind of the Darwinian theory of life. And I don't mind it when people who deserve to die are dead at the hands of a gun. But when the people who don't deserve to die, the people who are smarter and intelligent and deserve the opportunity to have their lives fulfilled, past the point of the bullet, that's when the Darwinian theory goes out the window. So it's a very tricky slope, as I said before. I've still not made my decision, by the way. But as far as the Democratic nomination, Hillary, I had mentioned this in an earlier podcast, and I don't want to sound like I have some amazing foresight and pat myself on the back. But as I had mentioned earlier, very early in her campaign beginnings, the problem she's going to face, and that's Benghazi, Lewinsky, the Blackwater, all the scandals that, so far her husband and her have been able to bounce off like Teflon to. But there's so many. And it just takes one knight in shining armor. That knight in shining armor, one candidate who doesn't have these political scandals in his history, whose voting record stands clear, tall, and obvious, who voted to withdraw from Iraq, who voted to withdraw the war from Afghanistan, whom has voted on the side of the American worker and has not had his hands in Wall Street's pockets. At this point, Hillary, you're going to need a hell of a change in your campaign to convince me otherwise that Bernie Sanders is not the most likely candidate to support the Democratic side. And I said, though, I'm still keeping an open mind. As far as the Republican side, as I've said before, and again, I'll repeat this, much like Bill Maher, I'm an independent liberal, if that's possible to be. I'm for the guy who has the best plan. Hey, if you're a Republican and you've got a plan that gets out of this mess, get the American worker fair wages, and get our country rolling again, I'm willing to listen. I'm looking at the Republican side, though, and it's just in shambles as far as I'm concerned. If Donald Trump is your second best at this point in the polls, a man who spews ridiculous anti-Mexican, anti-everything as far as anti-tax, I would say like that. He's not a politician. I'll give him that. Maybe he'd be better off if he had been a politician. Then at least he'd have a record to stand on. Because what I see is a man who stands on the failures of others and who's taken advantage of the banks to the point where he has built his empire basically on the crashing nightmarish dreams of others. Well, I say nightmarish dreams. I'd rather say the hopes of others he's taken advantage of. And as is proof of that Univision lawsuit, a man nothing more that wants to gain anything he can off of other people's poor decisions. And I think it was a poor decision on Univision's part to withdraw from the American Beauty Pageant, because the American Beauty Pageant should be more than just about the man who arranges it, the man who puts it together. It should still be important. and something that should be on